When I say kick back and relax during this show, I'm not kidding. We're going to take you to a spa that has a special connection to nature. It's going to be great. I'm Smith. Welcome to today's show. Now, if you're feeling a bit stressed, tired, and just need a break from it all, you have come to the right place. Today's show is all about rest, relaxation, and recharging your batteries. We'll visit a spa that's located on one of the cleanest lakes in America. It's a wilderness getaway that will leave you feeling refreshed. Now, you can't visit a spa without sampling the food. And boy, do I love the philosophy of eating plenty, but in moderation. Oh, and I can't wait for you to meet a friend of mine, Barbara Pryor. She's very creative, and the first indication of her creativity can be found at the front door of her home. And wait until you hear what Barbara's husband had to say when he came home to find his front door missing one day. But hey, he wasn't too worried. I've also got a great viewer question about clustering containers, so we'll do a little mixing and matching. And what about these gorgeous roses? I'll show you how to create a simple flower arrangement using roses like these either from your garden or the grocery store. So when we come back, we're off to Turtle Cove Spa. We'll get the full spa package right after this. Hi there. You know, I just love to take you to places that have strong connections to nature. And when we learned that Turtle Cove Spa is in the heart of a wilderness that borders one of the cleanest lakes in America, well, it was a no-brainer. We had to check it out.
Turtle Cove Spa is a resort destination spa located on Lake Ouachita, which is a wilderness lake. This part of the country is a well-kept secret. It is a pristine area. The lake itself is rated by the EPA as one of the cleanest lakes in the nation. You could actually drink the water. And it is the perfect place to have a spa. For one thing, Hot Springs, which is 23 miles away, has the bathhouses, and it really was the beginning of spas in the United States. It's a mecca for people to come to this area. You can drive out here and you can be in the wilderness environment, the perfect place for people to come and disconnect from the hectic world that they're in and to reconnect with themselves and with nature. We do have an outdoor wilderness pavilion where we take them for outdoor massage, or they can meditate or do yoga. And then in addition to that, you know, we're right on the lake, so they can go and sit out on the back deck and eat lunch outside. They can go for a hike, and we encourage people to take that wilderness and that natural experience in to help them to relax and to heal. And so after you've gone out and you've climbed up to Hickory Nut Mountain and looked at beautiful Lake Ouachita and climbed back down, then you come to the spa and we'll give you a very nice hot stone massage or reflexology foot massage or something like that for your tired, aching feet. That's what a lot of people are looking for, is that combination of physical activity and connecting with nature along with the pampering of the spa services.
Now, coming up a little later, I'll take you to this artist's garden. And my passion, roses, a simple floral arrangement coming up. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I loved to get a new fresh box of crayons. It's because I love to color, and I would constantly use up certain colors. I've always been crazy about color. Barbara Pryor is an artist and interior designer. She and her husband enjoy using the garden rooms around their home for entertaining and relaxing.
One of the first things we did was change the door because it was just a plain old brown door. And my grandchildren and I decided to paint it, and then they helped me make the Moroccan designs, and they loved hammering in all of these nails. The door knocker is from China, and so it's all a big mix. In any case, we hope that it's very welcoming. My husband came home from work, and there was just a piece of Visqueen over the door, and he came in and he said, "Somebody's taken our front door." Of course, it was in the garage, and the children and I were beating it up and painting it. It was really, really a great experience. They loved it. The garden house started with a fish, a Chinese fish, which is on the roof, and it's really 8 feet long. It doesn't look that big from there. But I decided that as long as I had the fish, then I had to have a house for it to go on. The fish house was so bright that I felt like the things that were with it also needed to be very brightly colored. Things like old shutters from New Orleans and capital carvings that went under roofs and stained glass doors and, of course, endless blue bottles. At the same time, I didn't want to lose the natural beauty of those dry stacked walls, and so I wanted the space itself to show, but of course the fish house is kind of the crowning touch up there. I always encourage everyone to use lots of color in their houses, on their walls, outdoors, wherever, because I think it's very uplifting.
You know, I think it's interesting to note that Barbara took inspiration for some of her garden's art from her childhood, in particular the bottle tree.
The first thing that went into the garden was a bottle tree, and so that was the beginning of the whole concept of the gardens. And it seems like everything that was done went with the bottle tree. One of my earliest memories is playing with colored glass that my grandmother saved for me when we would visit her in the summertime. I would play with them for hours in the dirt, rearranging. She also had the first bottle tree that I ever saw. So for years I have collected blue bottles.
I think the Pryor's Fish House is a wonderful example of what you can do with odds and ends and those special items you've collected over the years. You know, in my garden, I've made room for some elements like these. Under my loggia, or covered breezeway, there's an old armoire. I found it in a second-hand shop. And while it's not as colorful as some of Barbara's finds, it's certainly handy to have around. In my vegetable garden, there's an old wooden chair that I've had for years, and it doesn't have a mate. I just move it from one side of the vegetable garden to the other, depending on what's in season. For me, it's become a place to sit and decompress after a long day. Okay, when we come back, we're going to talk about one of my favorite things, roses. And we'll answer a viewer question about clustering containers. Now, before we leave this Color Corner segment, here's a plant I just have to share. In my garden, I'm always looking for plants that are heat tolerant and mildew resistant, and at the same time providing me with lots of bloom. So I was delighted to discover Intensia neon pink phlox. Another surprise is that it's cold tolerant, so you can enjoy flowers until the first frost. Details on this plant and other colorful beauties can be found on my website, palensmith.com. Hi, welcome back. You know, I have to say that one of my favorite moments in my garden in the spring is when the roses begin to bloom. I just love them. Now, the roses I'm using here today actually came from the grocery store. Now, what I want to show you is how to create a beautiful, fresh arrangement that's simple to put together from flowers that you either grew in your garden or you just picked up at the grocery store. Now, it's very simple. I started with an attractive bowl and just placed some floral foam in the bottom. Of course, it's moistened and filled with water. Now it's just a matter of filling in with foliage. Now what I like to do is integrate a little bit of the garden whenever I can, when I'm buying florist or grocery store roses. Now what I'm using is two types of foliage. This one is a Nandina, and you can see it has a slight bronze color, which works really well with these two-tone roses. The other leaf that I'm using is one from a Photinia, Chinese Photinia, and you can see it has that slight reddish coloration as well. So they blend harmoniously with the roses. Now I think recognizing the color undertones of foliage and flowers and how they come together is so important. For instance, if I was working with white roses, I might go with foliage that was a clear green with no red in it at all, or even maybe a blue-green foliage. This seems to work both in flower arrangements and when you're arranging compositions in your flower beds. Now with this particular flower arrangement, what I want to achieve is a solid mound of color floating on this bed of foliage. Now when I started this arrangement, I placed a ring of the Photinia leaves around the edge and then filled in with just a little Nandina to get myself started. Then I placed a single rose in the center to sort of mark the top point, and then I've been building out the roses to the edge. Let's go ahead and add some more. Now I'm cutting these at about 6 inches and placing it next to its neighbor in the container. Now you may notice this arrangement isn't covering my face. That's the purpose. You see, what I'm creating is an arrangement that you could use in the center of a dining table, perfect for a dinner party. You can place in the middle of the table and it not be a distraction or a barrier between your guests. Now I thought I'd share with you a type of rose that I find really interesting, the David Austin roses. One of the things I've really come to enjoy and appreciate about gardening is that it can be such a beautiful marriage between science and art. On the science side, we have all of these technological advances in horticulture. And then on the art side, there's everything from a beautiful single blossom all the way to an entire garden. Some of the English roses developed by David Austin are good examples of this union. Basically, what he's done through an intense breeding program is combine the best qualities of two types of roses, hybrid teas and old-fashioned roses, and the result is a beautiful marriage. What you get is the constant blooming of the hybrid tea, and from the old-fashioned, you get the sweet-smelling aroma and those beautiful classic shapes. Now, you'll just have to take my word on the fragrance part, but just look at the robust form of some of these beauties, like English Garden, appropriately named, with its creamy outer petals. And if you're into royalty, you might try this deep red one called the Prince. If you decide to plant a David Austin, you may find that it takes a little longer for them to get established, but be patient, it's worth the wait. Okay, now it's time for viewer mail. Now this question comes from the Great Lakes region. Mary Alice writes, I came across some containers tucked away in my storeroom recently. They're all nice, but in different styles and shapes. Any suggestions on how I can use them in the garden without looking like I just threw them together in a hodgepodge? Well, Mary Alice, I'll tell you, you can imagine over the years I've collected lots of different kinds of containers, and each spring I'm confronted with the same dilemma. Now, one of the things you can consider is try to find one central element. Maybe it's the color, maybe it's the material of these containers, and group those together. Also, remember that cascading plants can help you hide the ones that are a little more worn than others. You can cluster the containers with the taller and wider ones in the back and work your way down to smaller containers. Consider filling the back pot with something tall and spiky. Then fill in the middle pots with something that mounds. And in the front, let the cascading elements spill out. I think whenever you can mass things together and create abundance in the garden, it's a great principle of design to follow. Now that reminds me of a design project I was on the other day where we had a dilemma. We had a large area that needed to be covered with grass, so we used a hydroseeder. Have you ever seen one of those contraptions? It's fascinating. You mix the seed with water and pulp, and then it sprays out of a hose. It looks like a big fire hose and coats the ground with this mixture. In just a short amount of time, the seeds sprout and you have a lush lawn. And take a look at these grass seeds. They're actually wrapped in 3 elements that give them a boost over regular grass seed: a fungicide, a growth stimulant, and a natural insect repellent. I suppose in this show on relaxing, it's not out of the question to focus on the lawn for just a moment, because for so many, it's a great place to spend time with family and friends. Of course, once you get your lawn established, you'll be faced with maintenance, and the cost of watering and caring for a lawn can be staggering. Here are a few tips that may help you bring your lawn through the summer. When mowing, leave the blades of your grass slightly longer by just a couple of inches. This will help shade the roots and reduce moisture evaporation from the soil. So raise the blade on your lawnmower. Next, it's best to water in the early morning, very early, like at 5 a.m. This gives the lawn an opportunity to dry before nightfall, a time when types of fungus are most active. This is also usually a non-peak time for most communities' water supply. It's also much better to water thoroughly only a couple of times a week than to water lightly more often. You see, deep soaking encourages deep root growth, whereas light watering encourages the roots to stay close to the surface of the soil, making your lawn more susceptible to heat and drought. Another thing to keep in mind is an actively growing lawn this time of year will require about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of water per week. This, of course, will depend on your soil type. When it comes to feeding, I think fertilizing once, maybe twice over the entire growing season is plenty. You see, the more you fertilize, the more you're going to have to take care of. A lawn can be a source of pride. Just don't let the summer heat get the most of it and you. Right after this, we'll learn the secret of making this fantastic dessert. And it's a super easy way to elegantly display summer fruits. Earlier in the show, we visited Turtle Cove Spa, and one philosophy that I really think we all can apply to our lives is moderation. Eating good foods, but in small amounts. So you may not think that chocolate would be on the menu at a spa.
What I like about this dessert is it looks very complicated, but in reality, it's a very simple dish to make. What I've done here is melt some semi-sweet chocolate. I'm going to spoon circle pattern on the wax paper, form a disc. Now, the creative part. This is a parchment bag cone filled with the chocolate, and doesn't matter what kind of design you want, just whatever you like. Now, I know you've seen chocolate leaves in restaurants as garnishes. I'm going to show you how to make one. Take a thick, non-poisonous leaf like camellia leaf. Take your brush, dip it in chocolate, paint a thin coat of chocolate on the back side. I'm going to take this, put it in the fridge, let it cool. To assemble this, you take the disc that we made earlier. You add your creme fraiche, fresh blackberries and raspberries, and for garnish, a blackberry coulis. And there you have it, a beautiful, simple, elegant dessert.
Well, as you can see, I'm just about to finish it up, and I've added another element. I found these interesting seed pods on a shrub in the garden. It's part of the Intensia plant, and what I've done is integrated it among these roses. I love the textural contrast. This almost looks like coral against these big, bold roses. You know, for me, creating a flower arrangement like this is like therapy. It's a wonderful way for me to unwind, and I hope in today's show you found some ways to kick back and relax. Now, if you'd like more information on some of the ideas you've seen in today's show, just check out my website. It's pallensmith.com. Until next time, from the garden, I'm Alan Smith.
In this garden I dream of a bed of flowers. Bluebirds sing of the beauty all around us. And every time the sun comes out, I can't help but smile. Oh, no, I can't help but smile.